at a very important part of the Gazelle's framework, which is the people's area. Remember, the whole framework is about people, strategy, execution, and cash. And this webinar, we'll be looking at the people, and specifically a certain questions, or actually 3 questions that are very fundamental to ensure that everyone knows what he or she is doing, and to ensure that it gets done in the right way. These questions actually come from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, and he, in the book, uses the analogy of a bus. So he says, do we have the right people on the bus? And with the bus, he means the company, and with the seats, which is the first question, do we have the right seats? What is meant is the role. So do we have the right roles defined in the company? Obviously, there are certain roles which are fairly standard, like every company needs to have a head of the company, or every company needs to have someone that does accounting. But beyond that, there can be flexibility. And the idea here is to really start first with what is the purpose that we want to achieve in this company, and then starting with a blank sheet of paper, what are the most important roles that are needed to fulfill this purpose? Having defined the seats or the roles, the next question becomes, are the right people in those seats? And what is meant here is every seat filled with someone who you would enthusiastically rehire tomorrow? Obviously, this is not always the case, but this is the benchmark. So whenever someone is in a role that you definitely would not enthusiastically rehire, then you should think about replacing this person, at least in this role, because very often people are good in one role and not so good in another role, and vice versa. Second question is, are the right people in those seats? And the third question is, are the people in those seats doing the right things? So are they focused on the most important priorities each quarter, each month, each week, and each day? So these are the 3 questions. Again, as a summary, what are my right seats? Do I have the right people in each seat? And are the right people doing the right thing? Let's look at an example from a former client of Gazelle, Gazelles International. Citizen is a US IT staffing and contract firm based in Washington, D.C. He started work with the Gazelle's coach, and at the time, Raymond and Alba were the founders, and they were also managing the company. But they hit a wall at some point and had trouble continuing the growth process. So the Gazelle's coach spent time with them and walked them through a very simple people organization exercise to help determine the source of the challenges to growth in the people decision area. He asked the 3 questions that you already know and that every organization should ask at least once a year, sometimes even more frequently. Are there any empty seats, meaning key roles, which would mean that there's no clear accountable leadership for this role? Are there seats with multiple leaders so that clarity and accountability are lacking? And are there missing seats or roles that are vital for healthy growth? And as the coach worked with Raymond and Alba, the following challenges were identified and corrected. The first one is that both Alba and Raymond were acting as CEOs, thus sending mixed messages and confusing their teams. The second one is that Richard, who was a key leader, was occupying multiple roles and was spread too thin and thus was ineffective. A third issue was that the role of customer service did not exist. That is, there was no one accountable for customer satisfaction, and it was suffering. Based on this, corrective action was taken, the roles were clarified. Actually, the wife, Alba, stepped down from being a CEO, so Raymond became the fully accountable CEO of the company. And this really led the company to break through the growth barrier and went on to new and exciting levels of success. So that's the example from Citizen. Let's look at how this would work in practice. What we have here is the functional accountability chart, or FAC, which is the recommended tool to do this exercise. You will essentially see a table. If you look at the first column, it says functions at the top, and this is where you define the functions that you need to run your company. This here is just a generic example. However, there are, I'll be sending you a template with which you can customize this and make it work for you. Note that at the bottom of the left column, you also have business unit heads. Usually companies start with functional heads and later on add business unit heads, but it's something to be considered. If you have, for example, 2 distinct service lines or product lines or more, then you may also want to have accountable people for these business units. The next column is the person accountable, and here, ideally, we should have one person in each row. We should not have rows without someone there. So, for example, if we say that sales is very important for the company, we need to have one person doing sales. And this person needs to also be doing a great job. So we need to be able to look at this person and say, okay, we will ideally enthusiastically rehire this person tomorrow, but at least we would rehire this person again, right? If the level of enthusiasm goes below that, then this is something to be dealt with. So these are the first 2 columns. First is the function, and then who is in each function. What we want to avoid in the second column is having 2 persons sharing a certain role, because in that case, no one is really accountable and it doesn't get done. It very often happens with things like marketing, right? So you hear people in companies saying, all of us do marketing, right? If all of us do marketing, then none of us is doing marketing. The second thing you want to avoid is having gaps. So if you think that R&D innovation is important, you need to have someone doing R&D and innovation. The next column is the leading indicator. You should not put more than 2 or 3 leading indicators. You can even opt for just one if you want to keep it really simple. The term leading indicator means that it's a KPI that measures progress as you go along. It measures if you are on the right track or not. So if we take sales, for example, a leading indicator for a salesperson is how many customer calls he or she makes per week, or what percentage of customer visits result in an actual sale. So things that show if we are on the right track or not. The last column is the results and outcomes column, which often are things that you can find in the P&L. It's things that are measured after the fact. For example, for sales, it is number of new contracts closed, or amount of sales growth from year to year. If you take this example to marketing, the leading indicator could be awareness. How much people are aware of the company and what it's doing. The result and outcome could be obviously revenue, but the important thing is that only one person gets to have accountability for revenue. Again, not several persons. But it depends on the situation. Obviously, the head of the company is maybe the most difficult to define. Usually, it's the person is easily definable, but the leading and lagging indicators could be many, of course. The head of the company is responsible for essentially everything in the company. But the idea here is really to choose the 1, 2, or 3 things that are most important for the company at this stage. So if the company really has as the target to become profitable within a certain time period, then profit would be the, the lagging indicator or the result and outcome indicator. If the company has the focus of growing very fast, then it's about growth. So there's more flexibility here with the head of the company. So I hope this clarified a little bit the approach. I'll be sending you a Word document that you can use to fill in. And I hope you find this exercise useful. Thank you.